Hey, we out here, doctorate day 2 of missionary in these streets. Class today was pretty legit. There are so many different things I could talk about. I mean, 4-hour class, you know how it is. There's all kinds of great topics. But there's one in particular that stood out, took a lot of notes on it, and just want to kind of relay it back to you as quick as I can here. It was on the story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. This is 1 Kings chapter 2 through 24. I encourage you to read through it. And maybe you'll see it in a different lens after some of the things I'll say here. My professor had some really good questions for us to ask looking into this story. And it really gave a different perspective on what was actually happening in the story and the implications for not only mission, but how we understand the people of God and their mindset and mentality. You can consider this part 2 to the video I did. Check it out. It's on Lamentations 2, verses 20, 21, and 22, I think. The last few verses of chapter 2. This is part 2 to that video. So when we read through the story, in short, we have Elijah who is told by God, hey, there's a famine going on. There's the context. The ravens will bring you bread here. Go by the brook Cherith and you'll get your water. You'll be able to be sustained there. And at some point, he directs him to go across the Jordan to the widow of Zarephath, and he says there's a woman there who's going to provide for you. He goes over there. She's gathering up the sticks for her last meal because she doesn't have any oil or flour left. And Elijah says, "Hey, I'm a prophet of God. Can you prepare for me a meal?" And she's like, "Well, I don't have anything left," but ultimately she agrees to do it. And the blessing was fulfilled that she didn't run out of any oil or flour, and they were able to continue eating. And eventually the son dies, and there's an issue there. And Elijah prays, and he does some things, and the son comes back to life, and the woman is quote unquote converted. But it's not that simple. It's not that simple. There's a lot more going on here than just this miracle. A few really great miracles that are happening here. There's more going on there for our understanding. So the first question that we were asked in class today: what does the location of the story reveal about the backgrounds of the key characters? One, we knew that Elijah's from Israel, so there's a whole lot of different beliefs in a system that he's coming with, especially as a prophet of God. That tells you as well there's something else going on there with his understanding and the way that he views the world. He follows God. The woman being from across the Jordan in the particular area, not in Israel, that'd be modern day Lebanon, where Zarephath was. This was a center of Baal worship. So her background is completely different, and she believes in a completely different God. So it's interesting because if you look at the story from the top, we'll say, yeah, the Spirit of God was definitely working here. But what do we see about, like, how obvious is that? Well, God is speaking to Elijah, so that tells us something. But what about the woman? Does she know that this is what's going to happen? When she's posed with this man coming up talking about being a man of God, it's like, I don't know you from Adam. The only thing I know about you is that you're not from here and you don't believe in the same God that I do. We don't have the same cultural context or anything. And you're coming here asking me for something. Not even showing up to help or provide a service, but asking for something from me when I have nothing. Think about that dynamic. It's almost kind of backwards, right? But I don't know. There must be something that's going on with the Holy Spirit here, because the woman ultimately agrees to do it, which seems like such a weird thing to do given the fact that she doesn't know who this guy is. And she's a foreigner who believes in a different God and has a completely different cultural background than this guy Elijah, who just happens to show up. There's the question of faith, right? And a lot of people might say, well, she displayed faith in believing in what Elijah had to say and providing the meal for him. But the rest of the story would kind of say different, right? Because what's her response when the son dies? And by the end of the story, when she uses the word "now I know," then we see the full kind of acceptance of who God is. We don't know how long Elijah stayed in this widow's house with her son. But for all the time that they were coexisting here while this miracle of the never-ending flour and oil is continuing, she's still struggling with what she believes about God. And so you get to that point, right, where that struggle becomes the most evident when the son dies. And not only does she challenge Elijah by saying, "Hey, man of God, what's up?" Almost like in a sense of mockery, like, "Hey, you said you're about this life. Why is my son dying?" But when you see Elijah take the boy and go upstairs and lay him on the bed, you see him also saying, "God, why'd you do this?" So their views of God are actually not all that different. But you would never go into the story saying or thinking that the man of God, Elijah, had the same perspective of God that the foreign widow of Zarephath had of God. They're similar. And yet you have these two people of different backgrounds and different contexts. They're both living and experiencing this miracle together. They're both living and experiencing this tragedy together. They're both wrestling with their understanding of who God is and why things happen together. And then by the time it's all said and done, you hear the widow's explanation about what she thinks about God. But we can't act like that didn't do anything to Elijah either, can we? It's interesting. There's a dual blessing that was happening there. It wasn't just Elijah, the man of God, God's people, going to serve the outsider and the other and bring them in. There was something there for him too. It's interesting. We have the question, why go, right? If we can say that God might be working in other people and other cultures before we even get there, maybe God saw what this woman was like and she was already bearing fruits of the Spirit, and God sent Elijah to her because he knew that she'd be the one most likely to respond to him. But it's interesting when we consider, wait a second, Elijah was already being taken care of by the brook with the ravens. God could have continued providing for him there. It wasn't necessary for him to go to the widow of Zarephath, was it? But then for her to respond in a positive way, it's like, wait a second, you need to go, otherwise your sustenance is going to run out. So God switches things up and puts his people in a position where it's to their benefit to walk alongside somebody else who's different than them. Because there's something not only that they can give, but something that they can receive in the act of mission service. When we ask the question, why go? It isn't just so us on this side can go and positively impact them on that side. It's a lot more than that. There's a dual blessing. And when I understand that I still have something to learn and to gain from the experience, it changes the mindset with which I approach mission. It changes the way that I view other people, not just as some lost fish I'm trying to catch and bring back to God, but as someone who with me is distant from God. And someone else that God is also trying to bring close to God. He's trying to bring me closer, and he wants to use me to help bring other people closer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm so much closer to God than these other people. We're all far away. And if some of us have to have a little bit more insight and knowledge and the desire to go and serve, then it's not to bring those people over there to God, but it's to walk with them closer to God. It's this two-way blessing that people on both sides can experience, that Elijah experienced and that the widow experienced. And I think it shows us as well that God isn't just trying to get people into the same group. I think when we split into our different religions and thought processes, we think, I need to convert you to be like this. I need to make you to be like me. And I'm in this group, so you need to be in this group. Otherwise, you won't be saved. But God might be trying to do something bigger than that. You don't get any implication here that the widow suddenly became a Hebrew or an Israelite or that the son, after he got raised from the dead, became circumcised and all. We don't see any of that. Yet we do see this recognition of who God is and this acceptance of who God is, a better understanding that they were able to have. And who knows where they were able to take it from there. Their story ends when that chapter is done. We don't know who else they might have spoken to or who else they might have decided to walk alongside with and share their story with. We don't know. God isn't just trying to get people into the same group. He's trying to get everybody to be closer to him. And what that tells us is reflective of the question I had when I was looking at Lamentations. How is it that the man of God says these things about God? Why is it that he has this particular view and picture of God? Maybe it's because he had to grow too. Maybe it's because that even though he had an understanding of who God is, he could improve in his understanding and get better with that. What does that mean for us in terms of how we view God? Do we need a refreshment of perspective when it comes to, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I can still learn and have differing views and a new experience with God as I walk together with other people towards God? We don't always look at the Old Testament and as God's people and say, yeah, these people didn't understand who God is and they needed to get to know him better. But that's the reality. They had a little piece and they needed to know more. You think about it. If in heaven we're going to be learning about who God is for eternity, how could we ever figure it out right here and now? We all got a lot more to learn. It isn't some of us trying to get other people into the same group. We all trying to learn about who God is so that we can relate to each other better and that we can relate to God better as well. And shoot, maybe at the end of it all, who knows what it'll look like? I don't know. We can only imagine. But it makes it worth sharing and it makes it worth going. Because there's a benefit for you, there's a benefit for me, there's a benefit for us, there's a benefit for them. God has benefits and blessings for all of us. So it's worth engaging in the mission. It's worth deciding to walk alongside somebody else so that we all can get closer to God. That's worth it. There's a lot more, but I'm going to save that for tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm going to be on this video for like 4 hours. And I ain't trying to do all that. I got to read and get ready for class. So I'll catch you in the next one. We out here and we out. Peace.